Hey guys, Sheephead here with another video from Final Fantasy XIV. Today we're going to be looking at the Bard and I'm going to be going over everything that you need to know to do optimal DPS at endgame. Now this is going to be the first of 2 Bard videos and I'm going to split this video up into 3 different sections. If you wish to skip ahead, then please use the annotations in the top left of the screen to skip to your desired section. So in this video we're going to be covering the single target rotation, what the global cooldown is and how it affects you while playing your Bard, and finally the multi-target damage rotation that you will use when dealing with 3 or more mobs. So let's start with section 1 of the guide and the Bard single target rotation. So the first thing that I would like to say is that the Bard's DPS rotation actually isn't a rotation and it's more of a priority system. So as you guys can see on screen, this is the priority in which you should use your skills to do maximum DPS. So first of all, we have Misery Zen, which can only be used once the mob is below 20% health. Secondly, we have Bloodletter. Next up, we have the Straighter Shot proc, which is guaranteed to give your next straight shot a 100% crit chance. After this, we have the Standard Straight Shot, which is going to give you the buff for 20 seconds to increase your crit. Next up, we have the 2 damage over time spells, Wind Bite and Venomous Bite. However, you should only apply these to the target if it's going to survive for longer than 6 to 8 seconds. And then to wrap it up, finally, we have Heavy Shot. So as I said previously, this is the priority in which you want to use your skills. However, there is one thing that makes it slightly more complex, and that is the global cooldown. So before I show you guys the rotation / priority system in game, I'd like to explain what the global cooldown is, what it does, and how it affects you playing your Bard. So first of all, what is the global cooldown? The global cooldown, also known as the GCD, is basically a timer which is going to trigger every single time you use a spell. In Final Fantasy XIV, and more specifically for the Bard, this timer is 2.5 seconds. And during this 2.5 seconds, you are not able to use another skill which is also on the global cooldown. So as you guys can see on screen, when I use Heavy Shot, you can see this clockwise animation appear on all the skills which are affected by the global cooldown. I will then not be able to use any of these skills for another 2.5 seconds until the global cooldown is finished. Now it's for this reason, and this reason alone, that the priority system kind of gets changed up quite a lot, seeing as a couple of spells are off the global cooldown. So as you guys can see on screen, I have now split up the rotation priority system into 2 columns. The left column are spells which are affected by the global cooldown, and the right column are the ones which aren't affected by the global cooldown. So in short, basically what this means is that you'll be able to use a spell, i.e. Heavy Shot, which is going to trigger the global cooldown. Now in between, you'd normally have to wait for 2.5 seconds to use another skill, but you can simply use a spell which is off global cooldown in between the time, and thus you'll be able to do 2 damage spells in the same time that you would normally be able to do 1. So as I said earlier, this definitely does change up the priority system, seeing as you do not want to use Bloodletter or Misery's End to trigger the global cooldown. You want to save them and use them in between the global cooldown after one of the spells on the left. Now the only exception would be if the mob is about to die and you simply don't have enough time to use one global cooldown spell and then use Misery's End. So in this specific example, you would use the global cooldown to use Misery's End, seeing as it does more damage than Heavy Shot. I'd also like to say, because we can now use spells in between the globals, it actually adds another spell which is worth using between global cooldowns. This spell, as you guys can see, is Flaming Arrow, and you want to use it in between global cooldowns when you can't use Bloodletter or Misery's End. So as you guys can see, we're now at the training dummies, and I'm going to go over the rotation in slow motion. So first of all, we're going to open up with Straight Shot. This is going to trigger the global cooldown. After that, we're going to use Bloodletter, which is going to be in the gap between the next global cooldown. After this, we need to get our dots up, so we're going to start with Wind Bite, and yet again, we're going to use Flaming Arrow in the gap. After we've done this, we're going to use the second dot, Venomous Bite, and now we just spam Straight Shot until we get a reset on the Bloodletter cooldown, or the mob gets under 20% health and we can use Misery's End. Now remember, you always want to use the proc of Bloodletter or Misery's End off the global cooldown if possible. However, as I said previously, if the mob is about to die and you don't have time to do a Heavy Shot then a Misery's End, then you should use the global cooldown to do the Misery's End. Now as you guys can see, my dots are about to drop off the target, and I'm simply going to wait for them to drop completely off the target before refreshing them. Now there are 2 reasons why you want to let them drop off, however I'm not going to cover the first one in this video, seeing as it's insanely complex, and it has something to do with how dots are calculated within Final Fantasy XIV. However, the second reason is in relation to the cooldowns and procs which will happen before you apply your dots. So as you guys can see here, I've just popped some cooldowns and I've dotted up the target with Wind Bite and Venomous Bite. Now at the time of applying the dot, the game is going to look at my buffs and it's going to scale my dots in relation to the stat increases that I have from the buffs. Now as you guys can see here, I try to refresh my dots early after my buffs have dropped off. So the game looks at my stats and it says, okay, he does not have the buffs now, so my stats are lower. And when I try to refresh the dot, it's trying to refresh the buff dot with a dot which is less powerful. And as you guys can see, it's going to use the global cooldown like I've casted the dot, but it's not going to extend the dot's duration because it is a lesser version. So in short, you want to let your dots drop off because otherwise you'll be wasting not only global cooldowns, but you will be also using excess TP, which is going to be completely wasted. Now before we move on to the multi-target rotation, there is one other thing that you can do to maximize your DPS even further. As you guys can see here, I'm using the rotation, and I've just used Bloodletter and Flaming Arrow off the global cooldown, in between my Heavy Shot, Wind Bite and Venomous Bite. Now as you guys know from here, it's just a case of spamming Heavy Shot and waiting for the mob to either get to 20% so you can use Misery's End, or for a proc of Straighter Shot or Bloodletter's cooldown reset. However, there are two other spells which are off the global cooldown, which normally aren't considered as damage dealing spells. So as you guys can see on screen, I'm talking about Blunt Arrow and Repelling Shot. Now these abilities, they are off the global cooldown as I said, but also they are free and they don't cost any TP. So there is no reason to not use these if you are not using them as utility spells for either positioning in terms of Repelling Shot, or if you're in an interrupt rotation, for example on a boss like ADS in the Binding Coil. So as you can see from the footage behind, once I've exhausted Bloodletter and Flaming Arrow, the only two spells that I can use in the priority that are off global cooldown, I'm then going to use Blunt Arrow and Repelling Shot in between any global cooldowns until I either get a Bloodletter proc or I can use Misery's End. Obviously, these new spells are the lowest of low in the priority system, and they should only be used if you cannot use anything else. So now we're going to move on to the next section of the video, which is going to cover the multi-target rotation. So first of all, I just want to say that you should only be using this rotation if you are doing damage to 3 or more mobs. If you're only fighting 2 mobs, then you should simply use the single target rotation, but you should keep up both of the dots, Wind Bite and Venomous Bite, on both of your targets. So before I explain the multi-target rotation, I'd like to explain the 3 main spells which make up the rotation, how they work and how you should use them. So as you guys can see on screen, these are the 3 spells I'm talking about: Wide Volley, Rain of Death and Quick Knock. Now these 3 spells can be considered as a combo, seeing as when you use the first spell, Wide Volley, you have a small percentage chance to get a proc which gives you a free Rain of Death, the second spell in the chain. This Rain of Death then has a small chance to give you another proc which will give you a free Quick Knock. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that you should only use the next spell in the chain if it's free, and if it doesn't proc, you should just continue spamming the first spell. Now the reason for this is simply just down to the TP cost of the spells, and it's going to make you run out of TP in no time if you do not get procs. So now let's talk about the rotation. As you can see on screen, it's pretty much exactly the same as the single target rotation. However, you're just switching out the on-global single target spells, which are Heavy Shot, Wind Bite and Venomous Bite. And you're going to be replacing them for the Wide Volley, Rain of Death and Quick Knock skill chain. Other than that, you definitely want to keep up the straight shot buff, and you want to make sure that you're using the off global cooldown spells in between every global cooldown that you are using on the skill chain. As you guys can see on screen, I'm going to continue the same base that I did from the single target rotation. I'm going to open with Straight Shot to get the buff up, and then I'm going to use my spells in between the globals such as Bloodletter, Misery's End, Flaming Arrow, Repelling Shot and also Blunt Arrow. Now when I do come around to the next global, I'm going to use the next ability, which is going to be Wide Volley, and I'm going to hope for a proc. If I do get a proc, I'm then going to follow up with Rain of Death, and then if I get a proc on that, I'm going to use Quick Knock. However, if I don't get a proc, I'm just going to continue spamming Wide Volley until that ability does proc a free Rain of Death. So guys, this is going to be the end of part 1 of my Bard video guide series. I will be uploading another video towards the end of this week, which is going to be covering how to use your damage cooldowns and when to use them, what cross-class skills are and which ones you should pick up for your Bard. what the Bard songs are, how and when to use them, a level 50 gearing guide where I will also be talking about mythology tokens and how to spend them in the most beneficial order, and finally some Bard specific macros which will make your life slightly easier. So guys, thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions or suggestions, then please put a comment in the comment section below, as I will be guaranteed to answer every single question that is posted on my video. Other than that, if you like this video, then please hit the thumbs up button and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the content that I have on Final Fantasy XIV. So guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Lying on the floor, and you simply just want to move out of it. If you do get hit by it, it's going to deal about 2 to 3k damage, and if this happens just before a tick of vacuum wave, then you're simply dead. So try and avoid this at all costs.